Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sean Lardo. I'm let me rephrase. I am Sean Lardo, the best host of OITVOIP's Partner First webinar series. Thank you for joining. I'm glad to see all the family out there to be involved today. Have a a good friend of mine, also what should be a pretty good webinar, and I won't say webinar, a very good informative discussion on a few things. Excited to have him aboard. I'm going to bring him on a second, but again, thank you all for tuning in. Anything you guys want to say during the course of it, everybody but Keith Nelson, he cannot speak at all because he has nothing good to say. But everybody else, feel free to involve themselves. I'm gonna do this right now and bring on to without any further ado, my good friend Rae from Datto. Hello, Rob.
How you doing?
Doing great. How are you, sir?
Awesome, thank you. I hear Keith isn't going to last very long, so we won't have to deal with him the entire webinar.
Well, at his age, sometimes he has nap time right around now. Medication was a half hour ago. So
very true. Very true.
We made sure he got the best of care. As a matter of fact, and just so we're clear, he's already on the screen talking. He already mentioned a few things.
Of course.
Wait. And here he is again. Finally, I had to keep the room ready. So
he's like the warm-up act, eh?
He is. He is our warm-up guy for sure. So again, thanks for being on, Rob. Appreciate it. I know you're busy. You guys have a lot going on. Actually, I've seen you more in the last 4 months than I had a chance to see you in 17 months approximately.
Which is great, isn't it? We're all back live again doing events. I think it's fantastic. There's nothing like it, man. Nothing like it.
I couldn't agree more. But I remember I felt like I had to get ready the weird first time hug again. Like we were.
Oh, yeah.
Are we in the friend zone? Are we?
How do you feel about this? How do I feel about this? I know it's a little bit strange, but once you get through those first kind of awkward moments, it's you kind of get right back into the mode, right? But
absolutely,
it's optimism.
Absolutely, and it's always fun watching the newbies come back. They're not even newbies;
Yeah.
they're old bees, but they're newbies for post-COVID, and because they have the same awkward feeling. They're looking at us while we're all sitting together, hugging and having drinks.
Yeah, but we've also been like at events together for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks leading up to that one event. So if we had COVID, we've already spread it to each other. So by the time the MSPs come in, then it's like, oh, these guys are really close. That's weird.
As we're heading to the hospital together. Exactly. Actually, though, I will say what I was pleased with the ASCII events with them doing the wristbands. Yeah. So which stood out, like when I was at the Channel Company Exchange, they had the green dot on there, which was good to have, but it was so small. The wristbands I thought were much better from ASCII.
The wristbands are definitely good, although I've got pretty big wrists, so it was like sucking my will to live.
So it's like a tourniquet.
Yeah, it was like a tourniquite. Fortunately, Keith wasn't there because he would have tried to put it around his neck. Then it would have a lot of problems.
Then he gets he gets excited, and then we have to have the doctors take him. But anyway, that's besides the point. I've enjoyed seeing you at the shows. I feel like we accomplished a lot, considering where we were at communication wise last year to this year. Yep. These MSPs, like every show I'm at, when I talk to the MSPs, they take a lot from it. I think it's that some people require in-person interaction regardless.
Well, I think it's kind of a condition of everything that we're all doing. Like even just doing this right now, I've got 2 additional screens on here. I've got Slack where people are looking for me. I got email where people are looking for me. I've got my lawn guys out there cutting my lawn. I've got 2 dogs ready to jump on my head. Like it's just when you're sitting at an event, you don't have those level of distractions. So you have an opportunity to kind of immerse yourself in a little bit more. But I think the most important part, and I know you would agree with me on this, is just the human interaction with other people. And from an MSP perspective, just engaging with other MSPs, like that is something you're never going to accomplish in the virtual world. And that's the sad part about it.
I couldn't agree. I totally agree. I think, what I had a difficult time with getting back into the swing of things, getting back in the conference shape, which is it is a thing.
And it's not your physical shape. I know it's not that. It's wearing sensible shoes and being able to stand at a booth for 12 hours a day.
Exactly. And the mentality behind it. And then also, I don't know about you, but my process had to pivot again. So now, I'm gone. And like you said, there's not the distractions or even the quick answers I give to my people, like when they through Slack or for Teams or whatever, and Discord, we're on all of them. I wasn't responding to them because I'm busy engaging person to person. So now I had to rearrange my structure and my process.
Well, we have to keep in mind that most of the world is still living in a virtual space. So they just assume, and it's funny how quickly it turned when we all got locked down, how quickly it turned where your availability was more so than ever before because you had no excuse. You can't say I'm on an airplane, I'm at an event, I'm talking to a partner. Instead, it's just this expectation that you're going to be working 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then on top of that. But now that we're going back to live events, the virtual world hasn't stopped. So my calendar is still filled with like 10, 12 hours a day worth of meetings, even though I might be on a plane at an event and having additional meetings. We were just talking before this about events that we're both doing next week.
Absolutely.
I have a full schedule at an event in New Jersey, but I also have a full schedule of Zoom calls I'm supposed to be doing with people that are virtual. So
yes, we had to make it a point we agreed that we would do every single quarter 30 pieces of video content, whether it was a live thing like this or other content to just help and benefit the partners. And we've stuck to that. That was COVID era, like virtual 100%. We're still doing that now, but we're also doing the travel. So that's why I try to make it a point, like when I see you guys at conferences, let's sit down and talk and make some videos. Let's do something. Because it's a double dipping kind of in a way, but it's beneficial and we can't change to your point. And now everybody, I mean, my kids, they always were on YouTube, watching YouTube. Now the adults are on YouTube, watching YouTube for how-tos. How to work with the company. So everything goes like this is going to be forever on YouTube, by the way, Rob, just so you know.
That's awesome. Great to hear. Great to hear.
So we are here to talk about some things though. Actually, you actually have a formal professional presentation, which we'll go through a few slides. Well, I mean, it looks good. I looked at it. It looks really good. I'm just saying that so I don't want to take away from that. Really talking about positioning cyber resilience to grow margin, increase retention with Datto. I think it's the big thing that we always talk about is how, and MSPs say to us constantly is, how do I fill my stack in the right area? But then how do I position it to my customers? How do I explain it and how do I sell it and how do I make money? Yeah. I think that's what we all hear as vendors, right?
Yeah. And it's not a Datto thing, by the way. I'm telling you, it's not a Datto thing because the cyber resilience conversation, or at least the cybersecurity conversation, is not about the tools that are in your chest. It's not about that at all. It's a whole combination of a whole bunch of different things, and no one vendor is going to solve the problem. It's going to be a accumulation of a whole bunch of different things that the MSPs are going to need to do, and it goes well beyond, again, the tools that are in your toolbox. So, absolutely.
So definitely want to get into it and get into a few slides. But I know we have some housekeeping to talk about here. I know you have some announcements. And so first, Datacon is still happening.
Yes, it is. Datacon is still, as of this particular moment, it is still a live event that's going to be happening in Seattle, Washington, October 11th, 46 days from now. There is a virtual component. So for those of you that cannot travel or don't want to travel, we do have a virtual component. And I know virtual events suck. You know this, Sean, and I'm the first one to admit it. The virtual events are absolutely terrible, and we know they're all terrible. And the longer they are, the worse that they are. However, I'm kind of approaching this from a different perspective. We're trying something new, and we've been tinkering around with it for a few different webinars now, where we're going to create a virtual experience that's very similar to, say, watching a sporting event. When you go to a sporting event, there's nothing like going in and actually being there live. But if you're going to watch it on TV, it has to be interesting and entertaining. And there's a whole bunch more information that you can get by watching it on TV versus going and being at the event. They're two completely different experiences. So the way we're approaching this is we actually have two completely different production teams. One that is looking at this from a virtual component, where we actually have hosts from a virtual component. And then there's the live component, which is, again, we'll do the usual Datacon thing. This is assuming that we're going to be able to have a live event.
Sure.
I have no idea how many people are going to show up. Right now, we've got about 1,300 MSPs that have registered, paid for a ticket, and are coming, including your dad, Keith Nelson.
So hold up. I will put you back in the green room. Please don't entertain him at all. Oh my Lord.
He's just saying it. So I'm hoping that we're still going to have a live event here in Seattle. We'll take all the precautions that are necessary to make sure that it's safe. And, obviously safety is number one. And Worst case, if it does flip and for some reason the state of Washington or the city of Seattle shuts it down or large gatherings, we will have a virtual event. And again, the virtual event would be like nothing you've seen before. I'm not promising it's going to be absolutely amazing and will replace in-person events, because I don't think it will, but it definitely will be a step up for sure.
Awesome. I'm excited to see what that looks like, because you're right. Virtual is difficult. Yeah. I mean, we've been through some virtual things that it's just, there's no engagement. There's no reason for engagement, because anything we're doing there, you can always find us anyway. Yeah. So it's basically just a billboard. Thanks, Keith. I see Rob reading your message and smiling. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So again, take away from the COVID aspect, talk about cybersecurity, resiliency, and everything else. Obviously, there's been some big things that have happened over the past couple of years with companies within your own industry. Yeah. So that's public knowledge, which we won't get into. However, everybody knows it's existed. You and I had a conversation at one point, actually, when we were in person, and you were telling me about your CISO and how like really how much he's prepared.
Yeah.
How much, how he was, for lack of a better.
So it's his name is Ryan Weeks. If you hadn't had a chance to run across Ryan Weeks, he's up here. I know this says panelists. This is panelists for a webinar that we ran at the beginning of July. Unfortunately, these guys aren't showing up to this particular webinar. One day, maybe we can get these guys on here, because they're a phenomenal team. But Ryan is probably one of the best CISOs in the industry. Forget about just in the MSP space. He just gets it. And the story that I tell is back about 4 or 5 years ago. I think Ryan's been with us now. Austin was still the CEO back then. And Austin came and said, "Hey, I'm hiring a CISO." And I said, I think that's ridiculous. We don't sell security services. At that time, we only sold backup. So why do we need a CISO? And he said, the CISO's not for you. The CISO's for us. And basically what his job was to take a look at our technologies and find gaps, because Austin, having the foresight way back in the day, was like, if we get hacked, if we have a problem, if there's something that impacts the MSP's ability to do their business, we've screwed ourselves, we've screwed our business, we've screwed our partners, and we can't have that. We absolutely can't have that. So, that's where Ryan was a little bit behind the scenes for at least the first couple of years, just kind of tightening up our own defenses. And then now you're starting to see Ryan talking outwardly about things that vendors should be doing. And by no means, Sean, am I talking about this as a Datto pitch. Right. We all saw the hack at the beginning of July. And as much as one would think, hey, that's a competitor of mine, that should be a very good thing for us, it was not. I mean, it was from a business perspective, but it's not from an MSP perspective, because
it's not though. I don't think it is. Some of the rumblings I've heard is, let's not use an RMM.
So we can get into that. But the actual hack itself, and then the one that happened late or back in 2020, these are not good things for us as an industry as a whole, and it reflects poorly upon all of us. And it goes back to exactly what you're talking about. Now all of a sudden we're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, let's not use RMM, which is a ridiculous conversation. There's a bunch of people trying to get a bunch of press around this stuff right now. I kind of draw the analogy. Maybe if you can flip to the next one, and I'll kind of show you what this looks like. But when that hack happened, the first thing that we did was we rallied together our partners to talk about what we do within our own RMM to make sure that they are safe, and why we wouldn't fall trapped to that same problem there. And I think all the vendors at that particular point were kind of doing those kinds of things, which is, look, your bank just got robbed. Okay. You lost some money with your bank being robbed, but just because your bank got robbed doesn't mean all banks are that vulnerable, or all banks are going to get robbed the same way. It's like an MSP. If you are working on and developing a security story, and maybe you spent some time and energy and people and money on it, and then all of a sudden some MSP down the street does something irresponsible, that doesn't mean your MSP is just as bad as that MSP, because you've actually made some efforts to kind of shore stuff up. So this whole throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, it's really driving me a little bit nutty. And the whole idea that, well, if they got hacked, anybody can get hacked. And yes, and I think all of us would agree that at some point in time, it's a matter of if, not when. It's a matter of when, not if. Matter of when, not if. We all know that nobody's promising 100% security, but there's a lot of things that you can do in order to protect what you've got. Just because some bank was broken into doesn't mean you take all your money out of your bank and you put it in your neighbor's shed. That doesn't mean it's more secure. There are levels of security that are within this, and that's the cyber resilience conversation, right?
Sure.
It's like it's not an on or off position here. There's a number of things that we've spent tens of millions of dollars on people like Ryan and that executive team on technology, on innovation. We have 30 full-time security staff at Datto that do nothing but pen test our own stuff, and we do third-party stuff, and we have a whole process.
Sure.
And we share all this with our partners. It's part of the investment you make. It's just not fair to say, wow, this one was garbage, therefore they're all garbage kind of thing. It's just not a cool conversation. We're just trying to, little PSA, just trying to get out there and just kind of like share with everybody that, it doesn't have to, it's not an all or one.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I think it's extremely vitally important anyway, because, well, aside from the industry, take away you guys specifically or anybody else you're working with, during this day and age now, and you and I were talking about these stats before, so we'll get into that, but just how important MSPs are to local businesses now, and where they provide value completely. And you guys have a report you guys ran, and also, yes, we'll go right to this. And also, you had pointed out how Jay McBain had made this mention about MSPs during COVID. I think this is, and I'll let you speak to it, but those three very large bolded words, I think, are very important.
I agree. So this is talking about MSP business during COVID. What happened is, and I don't know if you ever had Jay on your show, on your event here.
Not on this one. We had him on. We did a virtual event last year, the Cloud Connection Summit 2020. We had him on there talking about, and that was last August.
Yeah. Okay.
July, rather. I think it was July. So it was like in the peak of everything at that point.
So he probably referenced this because Jay, if you guys aren't familiar with Jay, fellow Canadian, but he also he actually spent a lot of time. He understands the MSP space pretty intimately. Spent some time with organizations like Lenovo and Autotask and that, so he understands the MSP space. And now he's over at Forrester, and really talking about and analyzing the MSP space for them. So he comes up with some really cool stuff. He's got some really cool ways in which he's looking at data and looking at how the MSP space is evolving. And I reference his stuff quite a bit, but this one was kind of interesting for me. This was done in May of 2020, so right after COVID kind of popped there. And he had done a survey of end users about how they were engaging with and why they were engaging with their with the channel. And this again is like that whole idea of like, we need to get more people outsourcing IT, right? And we're getting to the point actually where more business is done through the MSPs than by any other avenue in technology. I actually heard Austin reference that not just a couple of weeks ago on a webinar. So we are seeing that growth in the MSP space, and COVID, I think, is accelerating it. And there's those opportunities, which I think you want to talk about during this. But there were three things that pre-COVID versus post-COVID where end users appreciated their MSPs more. And that was the agility, responsiveness, and cross-functionalization of their MSPs. Mm-hmm. And pre-COVID, a lot of my conversations were, let's talk about retention, because end users don't understand the value of the MSP. They don't understand what they're paying for. And a lot of, the whole idea is that if you never hear from me, that means everything is going well. It's so how do you make sure that your end users understand the value of what you're doing? And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden they've got somebody to call, they've got the throat to choke, they've got somebody that's all over them 24/7, helping them get set up and secure and connected and all those types of things. So that whole understanding of the value out of the MSP really came to the forefront during COVID. And I talk about this time being a golden age, and I think years from now, when we are hugging in a bar without hesitation or wristbands that are sucking your will to live, I think we're going to be looking back at this time and going, COVID was a great thing for the channel. Not obviously the human elements of it, but from a business perspective, it was a great thing for the MSP channel.
I would agree. And I would say that those three words right there apply to us as vendors as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I would agree with that, because you see a lot of vendors that had to really step up. I don't know about you, Sean, but I've seen also a ton of new vendors entering this space as a result of this on an accelerated way, as
Yes.
opposed to kind of slow rolling it, because the massive opportunities that are happening right now, not just for MSPs, but for a lot of the vendors. I think you'd probably agree with that. I saw a ton of them last week.
I totally agree. I think OITVOIP is one of them. We excelled tremendously in COVID era so far. We already had the building blocks in place. We had to tweak to get the word out there more to everybody, to let them know we were here to help them. Yeah. And that was what we focused on. And we focused heavily on that to let everybody know, hey, we're here. We will support you. We have the staff. We did everything we needed to do as a huge value add to ensure. And again, just like the MSP's customers, they want to trust them and it's one throat to choke, like you mentioned. Yep. That's how the MSPs feel about us. Yep. Now they know obviously that we don't do what you guys do, so they're not going to ask us about what you do. However, we made this community of vendors that we have too. So if they don't know you, my MSPs can contact me. I have your cell number. I'm like, hey, I'll get you with Rob now if you want to talk to him. And you've always been good with that too, which is great. I appreciate that. They appreciate that, but that's a big deal. And I feel like anybody that didn't want to play friendly with each other, they ended up fizzling out. You didn't see them anymore as much.
Yep.
Perfect. So you guys do what I love, which is the global state of the MSP report every year, which is huge. Obviously I did this. I went through the state of the MSPs with CompTIA, right? Yep. I love being able to get, it's almost like you're like a second opinion, and I appreciate that. So I would love to. I think everybody should understand what your findings are as a company.
Absolutely. I do also sit on the board of directors with CompTIA, so I do have insight as to theirs. They're really comprehensive on the things in which they ask, but we're also looking at it from a different perspective, where we're looking at some different angles on it. Plus, we've been doing it as has CompTIA for a number of years, so we each have the opportunity to kind of go back and reflect and kind of benchmark that data and kind of look at those particular data. So there's some interesting points that came out of this. I think if you want to go, there we go. Yep. So when we look at MSP, the whole idea is that MSP serve SMB, right? And it's funny because pre-COVID, part of my responsibility is expanding our brand worldwide, and I'm going into countries and into regions around the world that they understand MSP, they see MSP. They're not quite there because end users aren't outsourcing IT at the same rate that they are in North America or even Western Europe. They are. They're not like, it's still, they're trying to, and back in the reseller days where you had to offer both IBM machines, compact machines, Dell machines, and gateways, because it was the end user choice. Whereas these days it's not like that. It's like, here's what's part of my stack, and what's in my stack is not important. It's just like, it doesn't matter whether you use a Milwaukee wrench or a DeWalt wrench. I have a wrench, right? And I'm going to come and fix whatever it is that you've got. Personally, I'm more of a Milwaukee fan, but that's my Dremons. That being said, those things aren't as important as they used to be as far as what's in the actual toolbox. So when I go into these other markets, they refer to themselves as MSP, even though they're not really MSP. So, defining what an MSP is, things like 84% of MSP clients, so the ultimate end users, that these partners that responded to this survey, number of end users, number of employees at each of these end users is still between 2 and 200. So yes, we're talking about small, medium-sized businesses. The majority of MSP's clients, so the end users, spend between $5,000 and $15,000 per year on managed services. So yes, they have smaller IT budgets. We're not talking about mid and large market. And then I think one of the things that made it maybe really thrive, and why MSPs, kind of continue to exist and kind of continue to evolve, and why I don't like to say the word recession proof, because I think that's faulty, but I think part of the reason why we can come through things like a pandemic is the diversity of the clients that you serve. And, this whole idea of verticalization can work until it doesn't. And the idea that MSPs are more verticalized, they can do, less verticalized. They can do many, many different verticals, because IT is IT, whether you manufacture shoelaces or have an ice cream shop, it doesn't really matter. So
just want to point out, you plugged us by accident. Ray said Milwaukee has the same colors as OIT. He'll allow you to say it and plug Milwaukee. Just want to interrupt that real quick and let you know that. So thank you for that.
Am I not allowed to plug like a personal tool preference? I mean, I did mention DeWalt as well. You can bleep this stuff out if you want.
No, we're not. No, it was good. It was. Thank you for pushing the OIT brand. I appreciate that, Rob.
Nice. So all we can do is reference vendors with red logos. How about that?
Exactly. Red, gray, little black. Yeah, exactly. I want to, but I want to jump. I want to draw down on something you mentioned about being recession-proof and verticalization and everything else. I would agree with you that as far as you know, you don't want to use the word recession-proof because that's like I feel like the only industry it's recession-proof completely is healthcare. You know, just because sick people are always existing, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a well-rounded MSP, with every business that closes, there's always new businesses starting, and they're all and they're usually on a budget, and they're usually trying to figure out how they can do this stuff and get set up. So even if you walk in the door of a startup, and if you're in back to your verticalization, if they are well-rounded, even and if they're industry agnostic almost, and they focus on what they do, I don't see how you don't succeed and how you don't grow ridiculous amounts during this, regardless, especially if you're the first one in.
And I can understand the verticalization, the appeal of verticalization. I know a number of MSPs, as do you, that are very vertical focused.
Absolutely.
The key is though, you know, it's like you just said, there's no vertical that's really recession proof other than maybe medical. But let's take December of 2019. If you could be the IT provider for all cruise lines, would you do it?
Oh, of course.
Probably.
You would take it right away.
Business. How about now? You know,
nope.
Absolutely not. You know, if one of the big hotel chains came to you and said, we want to sign a contract with you to provide services for the next 2 years, you probably would have been excited about something like that, you know, and you know, that's the whole idea behind and I think part of the value of what the MSPs bring to the table is that we're not locked down for one particular vertical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, and actually this takes us to your next slide anyway, where we talk about the actual growth, because another common challenge we see is MSPs going from break fix to managed services. Like
so we always keep an eye on recurring revenue, right? And this is the part that I guess adds a lot, or I know adds a lot of value to what the MSPs are actually doing. So where were you in 2008, Sean?
2008. Whew.
Big recession, housing crisis. Where were you?
Oh, yeah, no, I was working for a SaaS software startup company.
Okay. Did they survive?
Yes, we went. Yes, because we developed a third-party tool for the Microsoft native suites, so that developers didn't have to go and build those tools. So it was a good shortcut. So we only because we were able to cut out I was about to swear. Only because we were able to cut out a lot of the cost for big companies where they had to pay their developers to develop tools. They didn't have to do it anymore, and they get right to the meat of development. You know, that's why if we weren't a means to end up saving money or getting there quicker and helping them cut costs, we would have been kind of in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about that particular time, and SaaS was still a relatively new concept. I mean, hell, even did I just curse, or can I say that?
You're good. It's a location.
Okay, so
like Milwaukee, and also is red. Thank you again for the plug.
Milwaukee is also a location, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Milwaukee and Hell are locations, and they both have red in them. So thank you again.
That's fair. Now I lost my train of thought. So back in the 2008 recession, this is when we first started talking, and that the recession, by the way, was somewhat limited to the United States because of the housing crisis. But we back then were still trying to teach what MSP was, and we're still on this transformation away from one-time revenue to recurring revenue. So in 2008, when people start worrying about a recession, am I going to be able to keep my job? Am I going to be able to keep my business? Am I going to be able to keep my employees? Cash is king. You start locking down large projects. You stop doing things that you were probably on pace to do. And a lot of it is one-time projects. Perfect example for me, I was going through a renovation of my home heading into the latter months of 2019. Heading into 2020, now all of a sudden they're talking about a lockdown. Who knows about the recession? We had no idea what this was all going to fan out, what was going to happen. So I canceled postponed my reno because I'm thinking I don't want to outlay all that money when I probably want to keep that money because I don't even know if I'm going to have a job, right?
Absolutely.
So let's keep all that. Let's hold all that. And back in the 2008, what we saw was a lot of that stuff being kind of held down and a lot of the project work being held down. The difference between what happened then and what happened now from a managed services perspective is that we've been on this journey, and '08 kind of really accelerated it for us, where we needed to convert to recurring revenue, taking little bites of the project rather than one big chunk out of the project. And it was very rare where end users were coming in and saying, cancel this per month bill. Instead, they were trying to find ways of reducing it, but they still understood that they were paying for something on a per month basis. But a lot of what we saw was that project work did get held. And it was like, let's wait and see, because I don't want to do a big office transformation if I don't even know if I'm going to be in an office a year and a half from now. So that's where this number, the 67%, are now saying that their revenue is coming from recurring revenue sources, is so much more valuable than it ever has been before.
I love that I love the whole conversation behind that. One thing I noticed in our discussion groups early on COVID were people trying to figure out how to keep their customers, make sure they stayed afloat. Customers knew the value of what they knew they had to keep running. They just didn't know how they were going to do it. And I know, and some of our partners talked about given the ability to, they were basically restructuring contracts, right? It's kind of like the NFL season when you got it, like Ben, we just did a Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, where restructured a contract, extended out a longer term and lessened the monthly cost, which could keep them afloat. We saw a lot of that happening. I think the best part about that was they were extending their relationship with them, showing value, and able to get those projects back a year later once they realized they were okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So totally love it.
And they have hopefully will eventually come back, or maybe they'll transform to something different, or even better, transform into some type of recurring revenue service.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, you guys broke down by the revenue by the numbers, which I get fascinated when it comes to revenue numbers. If you want to elaborate more on how you found this, because we already started talking about it anyway, but what are we missing?
So safe bet, because we did this survey back late in 2019 pre-COVID, was 2020, everybody was expecting it to be an absolutely amazing year, because 2019 was a great year for managed services. It was better than 2018, which was better than 2017. So we all anticipated that we were going to see growth heading into 2020. And pretty much overnight, we saw that shut down. We redid this survey just to kind of check and find out kind of what was the pulse. And everybody was still optimistic, but not as optimistic as they were pre-COVID. So now we actually have numbers. Now we can actually look back at what they were. 47% of MSPs still saw an increase in revenue despite COVID-19. As a result of COVID-19. So the impact actually increased or had an increase of revenue on the services that they were providing. And we saw this through things like digital transformation, cloud adoption. Like these are all things that the SMB end users were talking about, they were thinking about. Now all of a sudden, let's get it done. Like we got to get this done because there was just no other alternative to it other than taking a look at that transformation. So a lot of the things that we were kind of slow rolling has now all of a sudden been accelerated. Absolutely. Only 18% of MSP saw a decrease in revenue. That's a very good thing. And I was in the channel. I was working with MSPs in the '08 recession and housing crisis. I can't even name how many MSPs went out of business. For this particular one, we didn't see a lot of attrition. I don't know about you, Sean, but a lot of the MSPs that I know, even the ones that aren't still on the fringe and still trying to find their way, are still in business. There was very, very few. There's a couple, but very few MSPs that I saw that actually went out of business because of COVID. And then the last stat there is everybody saw an increase in workload. I mean, we're talking about that right off the top.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can say that we did not see very much attrition at all on our end. Most we ever saw was if somebody just said, I had enough anyway, I was in their retirement, I'm just going to sell. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. And this was sort of the catalyst from like, all right, I had enough. We're good. For, 30, 40 years in the business, let's just be done, But otherwise, we didn't see any of that.
Big role that we don't want to climb. Yeah.
Dude, I don't blame any of them. I mean, I think even for us as a business with our partners, only the first like that March, April timeframe last year was a slow month and a half about, because everybody was just uncertain what to do or how to position himself and what to do with their customers. And they all got nervous. But like within a month of that, we were back to record numbers for us with our partners, where our partners all experienced about 25 to 35% growth last year and up till now, which is fantastic, which kind of actually goes along lines of what your percentages are sitting here.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
totally, I agree with everything. So I know now, one thing is you stress on the next slide here is why it's good to be in business, in this business, of managed services. So talk, and this is a conversation I'm having next week at Channel Pros, the future state of MSPs, right?
Yep.
Why should they be excited about this? Where is it going? How's it affect them? How do they position themselves? So I'd love to talk more about that on this slide here.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite stat, and this number again is up. It's up from 86% last year. So the last time we looked at this data was actually pre-COVID. It was 86% of MSPs said it's a good time to be an MSP. Then you get into the pandemic, you get into the worry, you get into the end users going out of business, the ones that are spending a little bit more money, the transformation, all the work. 93%. That number went from 86% to 93%. 93% of MSPs say it's a good time to be an MSP deep into a pandemic, right? Like,
Yep.
For me, that number is insane. We cannot get this group to agree at 93% on anything.
93, I'll take 15%. I don't know if
But 93% of all of us think it's a great time to be in this space. And I for me, that's just it's an acknowledgement that we're all very, very bullish about what's happening.
Absolutely. I agree. I love seeing it. I feel like, and I said this to you before we started this, if you're an MSP, you should be running the world, man. I watched, like, even my friends that are small business owners locally here, how they struggle to figure out how they were going to stay in production.
Yeah.
On the simplest of things, like, how do I work from home? Where, a friend of mine does life insurance and health insurance. He has his own business for the past 20 years. He's used to going door to door, talking to people, his sales reps now that work for him, all the same thing. When this all happened, he was like, how do we do this? How do I send them home and not bring them to the office like I do every single day that they're used to? How do we manage this? How do we do it? And they struggled and this is where a good MSP that's looking at a business solution, it should be presenting that solution. Hey, let me tell you how we're going to do this. I mean, and actually I saw some MSPs start doing a work from home kit where they were like, here's your work from home kit. Here's your here's your video camera, whatever you're going to use. Here is your light system we're going to set up for you. Here's your green screen. They were actually doing this and saying, here, now you can do now. Because that's the stuff you don't think about until you're actually home.
No, you're absolutely right. And we were having that conversation pre-COVID. And it wasn't a very sexy conversation, which was, the work from home experience. And a lot of people were doing it, but it was a lifestyle thing. It wasn't a pandemic thing.
Right.
And it was very few and far between. And very rarely did the MSP have responsibilities that extended beyond the actual office building and that experience. Now it's part of the conversation. It is absolutely part of the conversation and needs to be part of the conversation. And we're getting better and better and better at that, which just creates a bigger opportunity for us and actually even more expansion, because beyond the technology, like having the right camera, the right microphone, the right green screen, you still have to have security, connectivity,
absolutely,
safety, education. All those things are going to be super important as we continue to go on here. I'll tell you. So I've watched some of your stuff before, Sean. Is it always just Keith? Like, I thought he said he had to go to the dentist because he
did, and he's still here. Yes. The answer is yes. Keith.
Okay, so it's always this, because I'm looking at these and I'm laughing at every time I say something, because I look over and read what he's saying, and then I lose my train of thought.
Keith is he's in the waiting room. That's what he's telling us. See,
yes,
and he's wearing pants. I appreciate that, Keith. Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes there's no way of knowing why he's talking about things, or like I feel like he's having a conversation with somebody else, but he's putting it with us too. Like I really appreciate the camaraderie where he brings us into everything he does too, as if he's on the webinar. Yeah. He won't stop. Like, no. And he works a lot somehow, he tells me, but he's the most efficient man in the space. If anybody has any questions on how to be a successful, he's not an MSP, and he'll tell you that. He doesn't sell. He'll tell you all this. If you want to figure out how to be a very successful, highly efficient talk to me. I don't know.
You should interview him about what it's like not being an MSP. How about that?
That's a good. You know what? We all right. We'll make a video on that. And we will do that, actually. We
I was
will.
actually checking. He does not have my cell phone number, and I'm surprised he doesn't have my cell phone number. I will send it to you, Keith.
Although Keith gave me some accolades when we were talking in San Antonio. He said one of the reasons why he ended up switching and working with you all was because he had said about the backpacks, which, by the way, I never got one of those backpacks either, Rob. I don't have one of those backpacks either. Just want to point that out. So just now I tell you the story. Just remember he said this and how all of a sudden he told you this, and within a matter of a day or two or whatever it was, there was a backpack waiting for him at the house.
So these backpacks, first of all, they're not cheap backpacks, and we give them away at Datacon. So if you come to Datacon, you will get one of these backpacks.
I was kind of at Datacon. I never got one.
I love these backpacks, and I just happen to have an extra one kicking around my house because they're immensely popular. He mentioned somewhere on social media, and I thought just to stick it back to him, I sent him a stupid backpack. And you're right. And you know what? To his credit, I saw him last week in San Antonio, and he was wearing that backpack. But I like to think that he's using Datto and a Datto partner more than just because he likes our backpack.
Yeah, but
Matthew's got a backpack too.
Yeah, Matt does have a backpack. He shows me it all the time. So, and I don't know, maybe he forgot that I was at Datacon several times. In fact, I was there when you launched Market Now, when I was working that with you, and still no backpack.
We tend not to give them to the vendors, but tell you what, I will make sure you get one if you come to Seattle. How about that?
Oh, that is good. That was slick. I like that. You know what? I want two then, because I'll have to give one.
You're pushing that. Now you're pushing.
I have to fly from the East Coast to the West Coast, dude, for this.
But you're going to get more value out of the hallway conversations. You said it yourself, than you will out of any backpack that you're ever going to get.
So let's talk about what's keeping MSPs up at night. I agree. No, you will get value. There's always value in being able to be shoulder to shoulder with people. Totally agree.
Absolutely.
It's that conversation that you can't have virtually. I mean, it's not like we're having a good conversation here, but it's not often you can have that with people in general, because some people on a camera and video, people get very different very fast.
Yeah.
It's like I always compare LinkedIn and Facebook, how you communicate.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you're strict on yourself. Everything's corporate America kind of mentality, business professional. Facebook, even though you're talking to the same exact person, you can say a totally different thing on Facebook than you can on LinkedIn and feel okay about it.
Yeah.
So
you probably shouldn't, but yes.
Well, correct. Yes, agreed on that too. Some things you should not ever have on there.
Yeah, you should always feel comfortable about it.
No, not well. Okay, let's make sure there's a certain comfort level that you have to have there has to be a level. Like
I learned a long time ago that if what you're about to say is going to offend one person, don't say it. It's not worth it.
Yep, agreed.
Even if we're just like if there's 1,000 people in the room and one person's going to get offended by it.
It's not worth the aftermath of what could happen. Exactly. And what do you care? And unless it's something that you are so stuck on, that you're so like your core value is it. Yeah. And you have to, and even then I still can't think to say it. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen any posts from you that have ever been like a negative connotation. I don't post any of that stuff. I believe that's why I like memes. I like memes because they're easy. They're fun. And they talk about, and now not memes that talk bad about people, but memes that are funny and stupid, like dad jokes. The only people offended with dad jokes are my kids. So I don't care about offending, and I don't care about offending them. They're the ones that, so I'm gonna say I disagree on your one person be offended, because if my kids are offended, I'm perfectly happy.
That's fair. That's fair. When I'm thinking about my audience, and children tend not to be my audience.
Agree. Right. Oh no, they have to be my audience. I put on I make them listen to my stuff. Like
poor children. That is child abuse.
They don't answer my calls so much anymore.
So we have child abuse with you making your kids listen to this. We have senior abuse by you making Keith listen to this. Like.
Yeah. Well, I believe in consistency, Rob. So
fair.
Yeah. So what is keeping up MSPs up at night? Back to our topic at hand.
So this is interesting because competition came up for the first time, and I think one of the things that I love about our space is that I've watched two guys from the same town, two different MSPs that technically compete against each other, share playbooks with each other. So I'm surprised that competition really came up here, and I kind of question the number a little bit. I think competition might be coming from a couple different places. And it's not just competition amongst MSPs. I think it's competition amongst things like vendors selling direct, or Microsoft that changes its business model. Things like that kind of are impacting it. Plus, there's a lot of MSPs that did a really aggressive marketing campaigns through COVID because they felt like this was a great opportunity to do that, and they were absolutely right. So that was surprising. But the number one thing that comes up, or at least in the top 5 every single year consistently, are things like the revenue growth, profitability, sales and marketing. And you know this, you mentioned Market Now for a long time. This is the one thing that we all continue to struggle with, which is how do we find more leads? How do we convince more people that they need our services? How do we continue to grow these businesses? The good news is that across the board, things are growing. It's just taking a lot longer than I think anybody wants it to. And sales and marketing is not easy. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, especially those that are more technically inclined. And I hate to stereotype people, but I mean, I see the struggles. I'm good. I think I'm a very good salesperson. Technically, I do not understand this world. I do not understand technology, the ins and outs, but I know how to make money with technology. There's a lot of people that I'm very close with that understand how the technology works, but don't get the sales and marketing. So when we work together, we do things immensely well together. And those things continue to come up as struggles and things that are keeping you up at night. Work-life balance, as you know, especially in this world, is important. Hiring, we also hear this a lot, where MSPs are trying to hire more talent, which goes back to adding more clients, which goes back to, all those things. So there's a whole bunch of, and I don't think there's any surprises on this list.
Right. No, I would agree with that. And actually, this slide, I think, is a great slide. Is, what are the opportunities? And this goes back to sales, marketing, and also positioning, understanding your clients and business acumen, right? So, yeah, I know.
I'm trying to ignore it, but I can't.
It's impossible.
When he talks about your mother, it's just really hard to
You
ignore.
can't talk. You can't.
I know.
It's like your children. You got to ignore them.
Like right? You just ignore them. You just ignore them. Right.
When your kids ask for dumb things, you can't give them. Like, it's like, I want a pony. We live in a city. No, you just ignore it. You just ignore it. That's all.
So we do talk about three opportunities, right?
Yes.
Number one, obviously, is cybersecurity, and everybody's talking about it. The problem is that we need to refine the message around cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, the term itself is like an all or nothing, black or white, on or off kind of thing, right? So the conversation needs to move into more of a cyber resiliency, because everyone agrees that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Yeah. And as a result of that, what you need to do is we need to position the services that we're all doing, and this includes vendors as well, as we're going to minimize the damage when happens. And that comes through the cyber resiliencies, because there are ways where you could have some level of vulnerability or some level of attack, but it's a very minimal, or easy way to recover. And there are things that we do within our technology to do that, so that if one of our partners gets hacked, if one of the technologies that our partners use gets hacked, that the damage that's done is minimal, as opposed to game over kind of damage. And that's where the resiliency conversation comes in. But resiliency it's a little bit more. If you go to the next slide, it's a little bit more than just saying and the messaging. There's a whole bunch of buckets that need to be filled. There's 5 buckets that you need to talk about: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And all of those buckets have a combination of technology, people, and process within there. And the whole idea is that you want to be able to go into an end user and have an intelligent conversation and break this down. And by the way, this is based on NIST framework. This isn't anything that we've created here at Datto, or I've come up with, or our CISOs come up with. But this is where we're kind of using this framework in a way to kind of break down the conversation, simplify it. So within the identify bucket, here's the technology, the people, the process. Within the protection, the detect, respond, recover, here are the things that I, as an MSP, are doing for you, Mr. or Mrs. End User, to make sure that when that moment happens, and the moment's called the boom, that you are to the right of boom as opposed to the left of boom, and that the damage is minimal in comparison to the damage being game-changing, game over.
No, totally. I can appreciate this. Now, for a question for you to MSPs, your education of all this to them, is it easily to access? How does that process look for them to understand?
We're on the beginning of this journey.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We're all on the beginning of this journey, because and it's very similar. I think about it like even from a backup perspective. When I joined the backup space in 2013, there was a ton of backup companies, and we were all going out there and we're saying, hey, back up your data in case you lose it, and then you can get it back. What we weren't articulating properly is Why are people losing data? Why is it so important? Because to be honest, when we talk about backup technology, it's not about recovery. It's about the amount of time it takes to recover. Let's assume that the backup is taken. Let's assume that the data is there to recover. But how much time are you losing during the recovery process?
Right.
That was the most important part of the whole story that nobody was telling. And now we're talking about cybersecurity, and it's confusing. I'll give you a perfect example. There was literally, it was the same day I'm driving down to a restaurant here in my town that I live in Connecticut here, and I'm listening to a radio report about ransomware. Wrong information throughout the entire thing. I get to the restaurant, I'm sitting down there, I hear two people talking about the cybersecurity pipeline hack. And it's just two laymen's that are picking up information from the news filled with wrong information. There's literally like so much bad information that's out there, and everybody's just trying to translate it and try to understand it. And the MSP has the knowledge and the power. The key is we need to translate it into something that the layman can understand. And that's why we're trying to kind of follow along this path where we can, I'll use the term, dumb down the conversation. Let's get away from talking speeds and feeds and into things that people can understand on what you are doing within these buckets, within these things. So when something bad happens, they feel like, oh yes, my MSP knows what they're talking about.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I know the next slide talks about actually one of the biggest problems people had was working from anywhere, given the ability as well. So back to being able to disseminate information and make sure you give the right education to your customers and the best approach. Same rules apply here, correct?
Do you remember when the work from home movement started right at the very beginning? And there was a big thing about, are your kids TikToking on the same Wi-Fi network you're doing work on?
Yes.
Because, foreign powers had authority over TikTok and all this stuff. Never really answered that question. We never really figured that out. And everybody's kind of looking at each other, scratching their heads kind of thing. These are the types of conversations that we need to continue to have. And what I'm seeing a lot of MSPs doing is setting up different, separate, secure networks. And the key for this is not just the work from home. And that's, again, it's about messaging here. People are tired of being at home. I spent a year and a half in these four walls here, and I have a beautiful office. It's away from the rest of my family. It's away from my house. Like I can come down here. I've got a full kitchen in here. I love coming to this office, but I get tired of looking at the same four walls. I'm very fortunate. So I want to get out. I want to go work from my boat. I want to go work from the beach. I want to go work from the cabin. I want to go work from an Airbnb that I rented just to get away for a bit. Or if I'm going back to the office, full-time, part-time, whatever. And therefore, the technology experience, what I've got access to, how quickly I have access to it, multiple screens, whatever, the connectivity, the speed, the security, all that stuff, these are all things that the MSP has control over. And that's the message of the work from anywhere. You know what? COVID-22, God forbid, rears its ugly head. I got you. You don't need to worry about this. You can go anywhere you want, and I'll take care of you.
I agree. I think the difference is too, though, between you and I, we've been traveling for so long and working from everywhere that COVID to me was no different in regards to how I worked, other than I couldn't travel to conferences. But as far as like the home office setup, laptop, phone, everything, and just being used to conducting business, that was normal for me. And I was used to being there.
I'm going to disagree with you there because my experience was different. When I'm on the road, 90% of my work is done through my phone. And the other 10% was done by a Surface Pro. And then what happened was, I love my Surface Pro, by the way. I absolutely love my Surface Pro. What I discovered very quickly is that when I'm at home and all of a sudden I started with one monitor, I now have four. I always used to make fun of people that had multiple monitors. Meanwhile, I'm on my little tiny Surface Pro or on my phone working. The Surface Pro wasn't able to handle the quality of, or the quantity of Zoom I was doing, the screens, the mic, the camera, all that stuff. So, that's where, again, I leverage our own IT team to say, my Surface Pro keeps crashing. So these are the types of things where I think it is a different experience.
That makes sense. That's fair. That is fair. So we have like 2 minutes left of this. So 3 big opportunities we can go to real quick. You just
Third one, co-managed IT, going up market, right? Going to larger businesses. These things are the larger businesses in this space do not have the same quality of service and care that the small, medium businesses do. So I think that, and we're going to continue to push this, that co-managed IT is going to be the next big thing. And that at some point in time, outsourced IT will just be a thing regardless of the size of organization, and the managed service community is the one that's primed to take all that business because of the knowledge and the education, the security, because of attending webinars like this, because of conversations that we have. In-house IT guys do not have this luxury.
Agreed. Actually, I see a lot of push for that co-manage. One of our white label partners has gotten a ton of business from co-manage because it makes sense. They can actually collaborate with the in-house IT. Works out well for them. It's a smart play. I think it also takes away some of your liability as long as you're doing it right and communicating properly, which I think is fantastic.
Completely agreed. And it's going to be working with an IT guy, not a complete outsource. So this is a journey again that we're on. Same with the cyber resiliency. It's a journey that we're on.
Absolutely. We have like a couple more slides. I think one more slide actually, which is how to contact you guys and what to do to find tools, because you guys have a ton of content out there. I know that.
So this report that we digested here, we've got a security checklist that's in there. I've got some co-managed IT stuff that's in there. I've got some additional reports that are in there that are talking about the opportunity from a COVID perspective. If you want any of that, you send an email to tools@datto.com, you'll get a bounce back with all that stuff immediately. And that's good probably as long as this exists on YouTube, I hope. So you can pretty much hit that anytime.
Yep. Also, anybody that didn't have a chance to register can register still for this, and we will be sending out this whole thing too to everybody that's on there. We'll email it directly to you guys. So we have one last thing to discuss here, which is our upcoming events. And the only reason why it's important to discuss this, obviously today we're doing this. Next week I'll be at the SMB, the Channel Pro SMB Forum in Boston. You'll be at, in Jersey, New York. Where are you going for?
IT by Design.
That's it.
World IT. Yeah, I'll be there live next week, all week in New Jersey if anybody's there. Otherwise, if you're in the Boston area, go check out Channel Pro. What a great event that Joel does. You guys are going to be there. I'll have some people there as well. So it's definitely a good event.
It absolutely is. We will be having another webinar on the 9th with my good friend, and you know her well, Heather Margolis from Sparker Channel.
Yep, absolutely.
And then I want to skip the main event, really, will be on the 9th as well, that evening, the Tech Bar, and that's with you.
Nice. Now, Tech Bar, does that mean I get to drink?
Yes, we drink, we play games, we basically talk nonsense, talk about the industry, talk about what's going on, relive some history stuff. What it is it's just us being at the bar at the conference. What we do, that's why we started this.
Love it.
So this is all happening. I mean, we're constantly doing stuff the next several weeks. Oh, and Ray and I were asked to be the happy hour for Cisco's Elevate event. So we're taking the Tech Bar virtually to them to run their happy hour. So you guys need to be there. Seriously. Rob, thank you, man. This is a great conversation.
Always a pleasure, sir. I appreciate the invite and any opportunity to get in front of MSPs. I always love doing it. And for those of you in New Jersey, I'll see you next week.
Absolutely.
Or if you're in Boston, one of my guys will see you there as well.
Yeah, be sure to check out everything on our YouTube channel for OITVOIP. We have all this content. This video will be on here. Appreciate everybody being around. Thank you for helping our MSPs, man. I really appreciate it.